This is update for January 12, 2023, day 323 of the war and of the date update. So just as a heads up, over weekend I will not be making updates. So you'll probably see next update on Monday. So now let's actually switch to actual updates and news and discussion. So I'm gonna start with general and strategic situation, and then we'll go from there. So first of all, U.S. Inflation was 6.5%. The number is on sort of what's called headline is going down. The reality of it, if you look under the hood, it doesn't look good at all. The rest of this 6.5 is extremely sticky and probably will remain for a while. And the only reason it went down for the most part is because the price of gasoline and to some extent diesel fuel went down. Let me actually look at what's going on. So, and just kind of explain how this whole situation, again, we're going to energy, because energy is behind everything. And what's happening really is the US has been releasing, as you're aware, crude oil from Strategic Petroleum Reserve. It went down, I don't remember right now, like 375 or 72 right now. It's slowed, like the drawdown slowed down at this point. But essentially, a lot of that decrease that we saw is driven by, one is this release from SPR and killing of demand by the increasing interest rates that are going up essentially everywhere around the world. Additionally, as you can see, what's happening is that US essentially flipping situation with Russia and becoming sort of equally important and equal supplier of energy to Europe. This situation is also not sustainable because US does not really cover its own needs from its own production at this point. So again, this is also SPR as a source, and then we might be up to a perfect storm because, as you're aware, China is removing all of those restrictions because the economy there is starting to really blow up and cannot sustain all of those restrictions, and their social unrest could be extremely dangerous for the Chinese leadership. So they sort of like letting pressure of the cooker, and that may increase demand for all energy. And so we have like different forces, right? On one side, U.S. Federal Reserve, ECB, killing demand for energy. On the other hand, China is opening up, increasing, and remains to be seen which force will sort of prevail. But there's a good chance that China will outweigh. So that it basically increases in China will be higher than decreases in the US and Europe. What this really means in the end, that inflation, even this kind of like commodity inflation, will still remain high, and we may see, especially towards the summer, that inflation is not going away, and the more sort of painful measures are needed in the US and in Europe. So that's just kind of like where things looks like they are going. This is just one sort of main scenario. This doesn't mean like, okay, it's guaranteed, but that's like where everything is so far going. For example, just to support this, China opened up imports of coal from Australia, which were, I believe, banned for some time. I don't remember a year when they banned it, because the relationship between two countries are, terrible, and for good reasons, because they are naturally sort of antagonistic to each other. So nevertheless, they opening it up. to basically better control price of energy in China. Um, at the same time, inflation is really creating a problem in the West, and in China it has facing different problems, but definitely in the West, as you can see, there are protests, of nurses or some government workers are popping up here and there, and that's just really because of the inflation, because cost of living is going up, and the salaries and wages are definitely not catching up. So the as a result, standard of living is going down, and for some, it may be just okay. It's not as great, but for some people, it means literal survival. Or, you know, if it's leveraged economy, it means like, losing a home or things like that. And so people are forced to protest in many ways. So that's sort of the West. Russian economy is also not doing great. And a few examples: the rental prices in Moscow went down by 10%. By one of the sort of companies that does research. Just for everyone to understand, Moscow is sort of like a hub of where all of the Russian money are sort of, let's say, accumulated. It's like just prices going down in Moscow is almost like snow in Sahara, and they're going down 10%. So just so you understand the magnitude and like why it's not just like, okay, prices went down somewhere in, I don't know where, like somewhere in no name place. Also, Russian car market shrunk by, I believe, like 60% for the year 2022, and that's also not, that's not really reflecting the true state, which is even worse, because that includes, almost two months of sort of more normal life. So if you really adjust for those, probably it shrunk by 70%, maybe even 75. So basically, Russian car market is what's left is about 25 to 30%, and even that is under big question, because there's simply not enough supply of the cars from Japan, from Europe, the ones that are really in demand, because nobody wants to buy Chinese cars. They're just not there in terms of quality in Russia, even though they're being actively pushed as alternative. But I mean, you need to be really desperate to buy that. Then in Russia, on the military side, so I didn't mention, and it was a couple days ago, there is new sort of head of Russian operation in Ukraine. No changes, essentially. It's reshuffling of the same generals. So the head of Russian general staff has become now in charge of Russian operations in Ukraine. In many ways, it's actually big luck for Ukraine that basically all the Russian leadership is doing is just reshuffling incompetent Soviet generals. So that's, like, I would say, big saving grace for Ukraine. If it were, someone from Wagner Group, that would be really terrible for Ukraine. So that's sort of, call it on the positive side for Ukraine. Then on the military supply to Ukraine, so some of the news that were announced as great and wonderful turns out that they are not sort of real. So, for example, that Poland announced that they will send, I think, 10 at least Leopard tanks. Turns out that Germany is not allowing export of those tanks, so the Poland cannot send it, and and Finland also cannot send it for the same reason. Like Germany basically saying no. And then UK that was planning to send Challenger 2. I think they're sending 12 tanks, which obviously, just it's not going to change anything. Not to mention the Challenger is not as great as Leopard or Abrams. I mean, it's decent tank. There's no question about it. on the same level as T-72, but nothing sort of like truly, earth-shattering. Then, as sort of probably, I would say, as offer something to Ukraine, Germany said that they're gonna send Marder IFVs to Ukraine by end of Q1, which by end of March, which obviously might be a little too late, as always. So again, Germany is kind of like always playing this game of over-promising and under-delivering, let's put it this way, and effectively undermining all efforts for Ukraine. But from German perspective, I can understand that, because what Germany wants to see is US stepping in a major way by sending tanks. Then probably Germany will do the same. So just follow the leader. Otherwise, they don't want to stand out sort of from the crowd, which I guess understandable from a German perspective. Now let's let's switch to Ukraine. What's going on is the power grid, no attacks, situation sort of stable in coma, no major improvements, no situation is not getting worse either. So more or less okay. Now let's walk through the front line, starting from the very north and doing it in clockwise fashion. So the situation along the state border is very stable. I would say fairly quiet. Nothing really new there. Now let's jump to North Lugansk. Things here are somewhat getting more similar, where Ukrainian side is completely on defensive, and it's really just mostly attacks by the Russian troops at this point. So that is what I mentioned. I think sometime starting end of November, that initiative is slowly moving to the Russian side. It's not firmly in the Russian hands, but the trend is sort of negative for Ukrainian side. Now let's look at North Donbass front line, where things were really not going well for Ukraine. As you can see, Russian troops are actively attacking. No advances today, which I would say not surprising, sort of normal situation. Again, I want to repeat the same story, where it's this Ukrainian Western propaganda don't want to admit that essentially Solidar has been lost. Ukrainian troops are still controlling railroad, which translates as salt, and one salt mine, but it's just number 7, but that's outskirts of the town. It's essentially the core of the town. The majority of it, overwhelming majority of it, let's say 85%, is controlled by Russian troops. So effectively, they captured, and the strongholds were those salt mines, which could be potentially defended effectively for very, very long time with very low losses. So this is again going back to the problems on Ukrainian side, problems at the command level and organizational level there. This is not the problems on the individual soldiers level, because that's what's really happening in Ukraine, is that political leadership and military leadership is trying to find a scapegoat, and the scapegoat is becoming ordinary soldier or the warrior on the ground, which they do everything they can at their level. Like you cannot ask for more, essentially. And so again, that really guarantees that this problem will persist and will lead to more problems and bigger problems and potentially bigger tragedies. As long as Wagner Group remains sort of intact, and the head of Wagner Group remains there, and the whole organization remains there, they will continue sort of doing their thing, and unfortunately inflicting losses on the Ukrainian side. So then next sort of steps here is sort of super obvious. Basically attacking straight west somehow for the by the Wagner mercenaries, and outflanking Bakhmut from the north, and then doing the same thing from the south and effectively forcing withdrawal from Bakhmut. Very sort of standard cookie cutter scheme that's being used by the Russian side. I mean, there's nothing wrong in it. It's very reasonable approach. Um, you know, it may take them a while to actually execute. Really depends. We'll see. We'll see in the next week. Um, if I said before, as I said yesterday, if the backbone of Ukrainian military units has been, I would say, irreparably damaged in this area. If it is, then the advances will come kind of faster and more regular. If there's still enough sort of backbone left, then the situation will be developing extremely slowly. So hard to say without actually being sort of in the unit literally on the ground and understanding what's going on there. But in a nutshell, the strategy by Wagner group continues, and the lack of strategy by Ukrainian command continues, which guarantees a negative outcome for Ukraine, just a question of time. And the military equipment, it's not coming in the numbers that's needed to compensate for this organizational lack on the Ukrainian side. Now let's look at the central Donbas front line. Things here almost, again, cookie cutter for Russia, which also makes it is super, if this was a sort of normal, call it military leadership, these attacks are so predictable. Russian troops would have been drained of their soldiers long time ago with this predictability, because there is no, how to say, creativity. It's very primitive what the Russian general is doing. And so during World War II, in similar situations, German commanders were inflicting extremely high losses on their Soviet units in the similar situations, because there was the same cookie cutter approaches, like attacking, hammering in the same place 20 times, 100 times, whatever is times, which means extremely high losses. So again, the same as you can see, Marinka is the same, and Pisky salient, right? If you concentrate, artillery in Ukrainian side and have those, Arlan equivalents, you can literally disrupt all of these attacks and actually inflict extremely high losses on attackers. Not happening because, again, going back to organizational problems on the Ukrainian side. And then Russian command decided to try, another location. Well, not another location, but decided to try again in Velika Novosilka without success. So just a reminder. So basically, all of this front line, starting from Novomikhailivka to Velika Novosilka, is essentially one sector of the front line. And Russian troops are trying to figure out how to break through somewhere here, because they're really stuck in Marinka, and they're looking for alternatives. And alternatives are so far pretty terrible. So they kind of like generally strategically stuck in this southern sector of the central Donbas front line. I would say the same is true is up north here in Pisky and so on, but I'm just trying to explain that they're at least looking for sort of opportunities for weak links, but so far they were without success. So that's it. And then the Zaporizhya front line is, I don't want to even look at it. It's just quiet and dead. Whenever sort of it wakes up, we'll discuss it. But for now, I think it will be quiet for some time. That's it for today. Thanks for watching, and until tomorrow. Bye bye.